Okay, and up next, let's work on add job page, where basically we're going to have a form with some input values. And then once we submit, we'll create a job and also we'll be able to edit jobs in this page. But that is coming up. For now, let's just worry about creating the job. So let's say if I'm going to go here with position and then company, basically provide some dummy values. I can change the location if I want over here. I can also change the status, whether the job is pending, it's declined, or there's an interview. And the same goes for the job type, whether this is part-time, remote, or internship. And then once we submit, if we provide all the values, we're going to create a new job. All the fields are set back to default. And then if I'm going to navigate to all jobs, then this is going to be the job that we just created. And like I said, we'll be able to edit jobs here as well. So once I click on edit, notice we navigate back to add job. However, now we have edit job here as a title. And also once we'll submit, we'll actually edit the job. So let's just say position and then testing. Let me submit that. And now, of course, we have job modify. Again, we set back everything to the default. And if we navigate back to all the jobs, now, of course, we have new value. And the same works. Let's say if I decide to edit one more time and then status is going to be now equal to interview. And let's say that the job type changes as well. And we'll switch back to remote again. The moment we save, we nicely modify the job. And then back in all jobs, now the value is equal to interview. And the job type is equal to remote. All right, and we're going to start our journey by creating a new feature. And we're going to do that by setting up a job folder in the features. And then more specifically, I'm going to go with job slice. And then there's going to be one more feature for all the jobs. Now, technically, if you want, you can combine both of them. So the job feature with all jobs feature that we're going to create eventually. I just decided to split it up just so we can practice on setting up more features. And also, the state is going to be quite big in that case if you combine both of them. And that's why I basically split them up. So in this slice, we'll worry about creating the job, editing the job, as well as deleting the job. And then all jobs feature that we're going to create later. Well, in that one, we'll just fetch all the jobs and also set up the stats. Again, that is just preference. So, of course, you can change it around if you want to. Now, in this file, we want to get create slice and create a sync thunk, since, of course, we'll communicate with the server. We also want to get the toast in case of successes and errors. Custom fetch, we already know why. And yes, eventually, again, we will refactor this. But for now, I want to set up everything in the slice. And also get user from local storage effectively because we will eventually have functionality where job location will be set equal to the user location. Remember in the profile, we changed the location. At least we set up the field that allowed the user to do so. So we'll use that value instead. Now we'll set up this initial state. So again, we'll have loading, which is going to be set equal to false, position company. These are the values we're providing. For time being, job location will be empty. Again, there's going to be a different logic a little bit later. And then the reason why we have here this job type options equal to an array, and the same goes for status options, is because these are going to be select inputs. So notice these are just text inputs when it comes to position and all that. But then these two are select inputs. And that's why we need to provide these values. And also we'll have is editing equal to false and edit job ID. Because eventually, yes, there's going to be functionality where we can edit the job in this page as well. Now, for this particular slice, yes, not only I'm going to copy the imports, but also initial state for the following reasons. First, most of the time when I record, I make some dumb typos. And it's kind of annoying to later on look for the bugs. Second, I really don't see any benefit of you watching me type out these values. You're not going to learn anything new. And third, and probably most important one, when it comes to server, the server is going to be looking for these values. So this array, yes, needs to be exact. And I think I forgot to mention, in here we have this array. So these are our options in the select. And then this is going to be the default value. So notice the default value will be full-time. And let's say for the status, it's going to be pending. So when it comes to the default values, yes, of course, you can change them if you want. Let's say if you want by default to be job type equal to the part-time, but this array needs to be exact. So these are going to be the values that the server is looking for. And then the same goes for the default value. It needs to be one of the values from this array. And this is, again, extremely important. If you'll set up here Bobby Lee banana and then vegan food truck, yeah, I mean, the UI is going to look okay. It's not going to change, but the server is not going to know what you're talking about. And basically, you'll be getting back the 400 errors. So let's start by creating that job folder with job slice. And then I'll copy and paste all of these values. So let me go to the features, create a new folder, and I'm going to call this job. Then inside of it, we're going to go with a job slice.js. Like I already said, I'm just going to take all of these values. And I strongly suggest you do the same thing. So go to README and also copy and paste them. Again, like I keep repeating, you're not going to learn anything new by typing them out, at least in my opinion. So let me navigate back, copy and paste. We have all the imports. So all of that is working. Now we just need to set up the slice. And we also need to configure the store. So let's follow these steps. So we want to create the slice. In my case, I'm going to call this job. We want to export the reducer and then back in the store. In my case, again, I'm going to call this job slice and I'll set it equal to the job. So let me set this one up where basically I want to go here with const job slice is equal to create slice. Then inside of the object, let's go with name first. That's going to be equal to job. And then I want to pass in the initial state. Let me export everything. So export default, then job slice dot, and then reducer. And then back in the store, let me get the job slice. Let me move it down and set it equal to job. And once I navigate to the browser, if everything is correct, we should see a different state in our Redux tools. So let's navigate here. Now notice, not only I have the user, but I also have the job. And if your result is exactly the same, then we can move on to the next step. Beautiful. And up next, let's set up the structure for add jobs. As far as the imports, we'll grab the form row component since we'll have quite a few inputs. Also, let's get all the styles. So the wrapper, use selector, use dispatch to communicate with our slice. Also a toast, since we want to display the error message if all the values are not provided. Then, yes, we want to grab all of these things from our slice, the job slice. So again, we'll use selector, pass in the store, grab the job slice, and then pull out all of these values. We want to right away set up the dispatch, since we know that we will eventually dispatch some actions. But then let's create right away handle submit, because the main structure is going to be exactly the same like we already had in the register as well as the profile one. So handle submit, we're looking for event, we want to prevent the default, and then we're just checking for these empty values. Now, keep in mind, now these values are coming from the state, correct? And here we'll look for position, company, and job location. Now, why we're not checking the other values, the status and job type? Well, because there's going to be some kind of value. So that's the thing with select. I mean, you will use only one of the values, but it's definitely going to be there. One of the values from that array. And if one of the values in the text inputs are missing, then Again, we display toast error and all that. We want to definitely return. And eventually, yes, there's going to be more logic. Now, when it comes to the handle change function, basically every time we'll type something here, we will trigger that function. For the time being, let's just go with event, and then we'll have event.target.name and the value. So this is the one that will pass into the form row, as well as the select component we're going to create. So yes, there's going to be a separate component to deal with our select inputs, and eventually there's going to be more logic. For now, maybe let's just log what we're getting back. And then as far as the return, I'm going to set up my wrapper to get all the styles. We want to create a form, and we'll right away check for is editing. And I can tell you right away that by default, we'll just display add job since it will be false. Then we want to go with div with a class of form center. And then inside of it, let's set up for now only those text inputs. Basically, in the next video, we'll work on job status and job type, because for those ones, again, I want to create a new component, just like we did with a form row. And then let's also set up the buttons. So still within the form center, you want to create a button container, and then you want to set up a button with a type of button. And this is very, very important. Otherwise, it's going to be actually submitting the values, and we don't want that. So make sure that the clear one is type button. And then let's add these classes here. And for time being, on click, we'll just log clear values. And then also we want to set up a submit button. And in here, we want to go with type submit, then class names. So pretty much the same deal, just this class is a little bit different. And then when it comes to on click, we want to pass in the handle submit. And while we're loading, we want to disable this button. So let's set this one up. First, let me grab the imports, and rest of the stuff, of course, I'll type it out. And I want to navigate to add job. For time being, we just have this set up. We'll grab all of the imports. Okay, that's good. Then let's invoke use selector. Let's pass in the store job, and also let's pull out all of the values from our state. First, let's go with is loading. Then the next value is going to be position. After that, we have the company. Then we want to go with job location, job type. So this is going to be the default value. And then right after that, we want to get all of the options. That's why we're going to go here with job type and then options. So that's the array. And you know what? It's getting quite annoying that it doesn't know what I'm talking about. So let me go here with use selector. Let me pass in the store. And then we want to look for store and then job. Let me save it. And now let me add rest of the values. So we want to get the default for the status, which is equal to a status property. Then we want to go with status options. Again, this is the array we'll pass into our select is editing, which by default will be false. And also we want to go with edit job and then the ID. Let's save all of this. And then let's set up those two functions, at least the placeholders for those functions, the handle submit and handle job input. Const, then handle submit. We're going to be looking for the event object. For starters, we want to prevent the default. So event prevent default. Let's invoke that. And let's right away check for all of those values. If they're empty, then let's just set up that toast error. So we're going to go with if, and then if there is no position provided, same goes for company. So if either of these values are missing, then we also want to go with job location. And if that's the case, let's set up the toast error. Let's pass in the error message. We already know the drill. Please fill out all fields, and then let's return, because there's going to be more logic later on. And the same goes for handle job input. Const handle job input is equal to, we're looking for the event. And then we want to grab two things, the name of the input and the value from the input. Again, I'm going to do the long way just so we can see that everything works. So name is equal to event.target.name, copy and paste, and then let's just change these values around. And I'm going to set it equal to a value. And yes, just so we're on the same page, let's log. So I'm going to go with name and value. Let's save this, and now let's set up that proper return. First, we want to grab the wrapper, so all the styles, and then inside of it, let's place that form. So we're going to go here with form. Now, we're not going to look for any actions, since we'll handle that using JavaScript, but we do want to add a class name of form. Inside of the form, first, let's set up that heading 3. And this is going to be based on isEditing. So if this is true, then we'll say edit job. And then if this is false, which again, I know I keep repeating this, but that's the default setup, we're going to go with add job. Then we have a div with a class of form center. And then we want to set up 3 form row components. Now I will add here the comments. So this is going to be for position. We want to go with form row component. Type is equal to a text. Then name is equal to position. And also we want to set up the value, of course. Now the value is coming from where? It's coming from a state. So our slice. And also we want to set up the handle change. So the function that controls that input. And now in this case, we want to go with handle job input. We want to close this component and basically copy and paste. So 1, 2. And let's just change these values around. Where for the second one, everywhere we have the position, we want to change it to the company, I believe. Yep. So let me use my multiple selectors, and I'm just going to say here company. And the same deal over here for job location, but we want to implement that label text. Because if we'll just pass in the name, yeah, I mean, we'll have the input, but the look is not going to be what we're shooting for. And you know what, just so you don't think that I'm messing with you, let me change all of them to job location. You can see what I'm talking about. So let me go here, job location. So all of this is nice. Yes, the name is exactly what we have in the state and the value is coming from the state. But if we take a look at our result, you'll notice that when it comes to a label text, this is probably not what you're shooting for. Now, is it the end of the world? No, definitely not. But I think it makes a bit more sense if we go with label text and then let's just pass in that value. So job location. Once we do that, we have a better result. And then let's set up those buttons. So still within that form center, we want to go here with div with a class of btn container. Inside of it, let's set up the first one, the clear button. Type is equal to a button. And yes, this is the case where we do need to add this type button. Technically, when you're just setting up a regular button somewhere in your return, I mean, it's better if you do that, but it's not a must. But if the button is inside of the form, then it's a must. So either you need to go with type button or you need to go with type submit. Otherwise, this will be treated as a submit button. And if that's the case, then we have more stuff that we need to worry about. And since I just want to simply use this button as a clear button, I'm going to add this type equals to a button. Then let's add class names. And we're going to go here with btn block, and then clear button as well. Then let's set up that on click. For now, like I said, we're not going to have anything meaningful in there. We'll just have the arrow function and we'll go with log. And then let's go with clear and then values. And as far as the text inside of the button, I'm just going to go with clear. Let's save this. We're going to copy and paste this awesome button. And now we want to go with type submit. Then as far as the classes, we're going to go with submit btn. After that, we're going to set up the on click, and this is going to be equal to a handle submit. So we're going to go here with handle submit. And then lastly, if we're loading, we want to disable it. So we'll set it up as disabled equals to is loading. And at the very end, we also want to change the text, and that will be equal to submit. And once we save and navigate to the big screen, this is going to be our look. So we have these values over here, and also we have clear and submit buttons. And yes, of course, we'll have the select inputs as well. We're going to work on them in the next video. Let me first just try it out whether I can see the values in the console. So I'm going to go here, and the moment I type, notice we have position. So that's the name of the input, and then I have the value. Again, we are not controlling the state yet in the job slice. Once we do that, then we'll be able to actually persist this value. For the time being, I just want to. Wonderful. And up next, let's work on that select input. First, we'll just set up the basic return in the add job, and then we'll use those values in order to set up a separate component, because we'll have quite a few select inputs in this application. So it kind of makes sense to set up the component, and then we can just pass in the values. So first, in the add job, let's set up a select input for the status. We want to start by creating a div with a class of form row. Then let's set up a label. In this case, this is going to be for the status. And we'll set up the text, of course. Then right after the label, we'll have a select element. Name needs to match whatever we have in the state, in our case, status. Value is going to be the status. And this is where that default value comes into play. Whatever you set up in the status as a value will be that default one. And we'll also pass in the handle job input. So the same function we already created in the add job. And also a little bit of style, so pass here the class name. Now, the way the select input works, not only we need to go with select element, but also we want to set up the option element inside. And the way we will do that, since we're working inside of the JSX, we'll iterate over status options. And then for every item, we will return an option. We'll pass here the index as far as the key. We need to set up here the value, which is going to be equal to whatever is that item's value in the array. Again, we're talking about these items over here. So when it comes to status, it's going to be interview, declined, and pending. And basically, the moment we'll click on those options, we'll set our actual value here for the select equal to the item value. And of course, as far as the text, I just want to render that. And then we'll worry about setting up a separate component. So let's start here in the add job, where right after the job location, I'm just going to set up here status. And then let's go the long way first, where basically we'll type all of this out, and then it's going to be hidden in the component. Let's start here with a label. We want to go with HTML4. We'll set up the status here. And also we want to add a class name of form label. Then as far as the value, let's just type here status. And then right after the label, we're going to go with select element. When it comes to name, we're going to go over here and say status. Now, when it comes to ID, I think we also need to pass here the status one. And then we have value, on change, and class name. So a few more things here. Let's say value is equal to a job slice state value, which is going to be equal to status. On change is equal to the function that we created, I believe, in the previous video. So handle job input. And lastly, let's add a little bit of styling. And we're going to go here with form and then select. So this will be our input, correct? The select input. Now we just need to add those options. So inside of the select, and just to showcase, if we basically just hard code something, say option value and then something and then type something, this is what we'll display basically. Notice Now we have the something, and that is our option. Of course, in our case, we already have an array of options. That's why we'll iterate over. We'll say status options dot map. We're iterating over. We'll grab two things. We'll grab the actual item value, and also we'll grab the index, just because it's a React. So of course we need to set up the key here. And then for every item, we'll return a option element. And let's go over here, and first the key is going to be equal to a index. Then we'll set up the value equals to an item value. And then when it comes to text over here, of course, we're going to go here with item and then dot value. So this will be our default one, and these are our options. Now again, we're not going to be able to change anything yet, meaning we can change it. You can notice that the input is status and the value is declined, but we're not changing anything in a state. We don't have that functionality. Now what we want to do is to set up a separate component. I'll call this form row select. We need to set up all the imports and exports and all that cool stuff. And then similarly to our form row, effectively we'll be looking for these values. So the extra here is this list, because we want to iterate over. And then every time we'll need to set up a select, we can just use this component. And you know what? Also, I think I'm missing here the ID. So I need to set up here ID equals to name, because that way, right away, the moment we will click on a label, it will add that nice styling. So let me try this one out, where essentially we want to go to components. We want to create a new file. Let's call this form row and then select JS. Let's set up the component, and then let's right away also set up imports, exports, because otherwise I'll forget about it. So let's say here form row and then select. We want to pass this one in, and we want to import right away in our add job. So let's go back over here. Right after the form row, we want to go with form row select. Okay, awesome. And then let's grab all of this code right now. So the form row div. Let's take this one. I'll actually collapse this. I think it's going to be faster. So let me cut this one out back in the form select. This is going to be my return. And now we just need to set up those values. We'll also go with label text just in case. We'll set up the name, of course. That's what we'll be passing in. A value, in our case, default value. Handle change, which in our case, of course, is going to be that handle job input, at least in this page, and also a list. And now let's just set these values dynamic, where it's not going to be hard coded as status. We'll pass in the name. The same is going to be over here. However, we'll check for that label text first. If it is provided, then of course we'll use that. Then name. Then let's go with name is equal to, of course, name. Value is equal to a value. And before we can set that one up, let's set up that ID also equals to name. Then value equals to value. It's not going to be handle job. It's going to be handle change. Form select stays the same, but instead of status options, the hard-coded way we did in the add job, we want to go with list. So whatever list we'll pass in, it's going to be different arrays. We'll iterate over item value index. That doesn't change. And the option also stays exactly the same. So now let's navigate back and let's set up those two other select inputs. And that's not what I wanted to do. Yep, close all saved. And then in the add job, let me save it for now. Then let me navigate back over here. We have form row. And then for these two, for the status and job type, I want to set up the component, the form row select, the one that we just set up, where we pass in the name, the value, the handle change, as well as the list. So in the case of status, it's going to be status options. And then in the job type, it's actually going to be job type options. So let me try this one out. keep on scrolling. Where we have the status, let's go with form row select. Let's pass in those values. So name is equal to a status. Again, I know I keep repeating this, but it needs to match exactly what you have in the state. It's a must. It's a must. Otherwise, there's going to be some bugs. So let's go here with value, and that is equal to our default status. So status here. Then handle change is equal to a handle job input. So our function in the add job, and then list is equal to status and options. Let me close the form select. I want to copy and paste, and this will be for the job type. So let me change here the comment job type. The name will be job type. This is where the label text is going to come into play. So label text equals to job type. Then as far as the value, we're going to go here with job type. Probably should have just selected. Beautiful. And up next, let's set up a reducer, which is going to control our state values. So in the reducers, in the job slice, sorry, here I typed user slice, it should be job slice. We want to set up a reducers, and inside of it, we want to go with handle change. It's going to be a function that's going to be looking for the state. And also in the payload, I'll pass in the object with two things, a name, so whichever state value I want to change, and what is going to be the new value. And then we'll go here with state, and then the square brackets again, because this is going to be dynamic. Basically, this is going to work on all of our inputs, the text ones as well as the select ones. And we'll set it equal to the new value. We want to export that using job slice actions. And then in the add job, where we have this handle job input, notice we have two things. We have name and value. And now in the handle change, I want to pass in that object with those two values. And as a result, we'll be able to control the state every time we make some changes in our inputs. So let's try this one out. First, I'm going to go to a job slice, and we want to set up those reducers. So right after the initial state, let's go with the reducers. Inside of it, let's come up with the function with the reducer, which in my case is going to be handle and change. Then, like I said, function, and we'll pass in two things, by the way. Should be a colon here. First, a state, and then second, it's going to be a action. And inside of the action, we know that there will be a payload property, and that will be an object itself. So we're going to have a name and value. Now, as far as the logic here, we'll just go with state. Then we'll get that dynamic value, the name one, and we'll right away access the exact same one in the state, and we'll set it equal to the new value. Again, if you need to jog your memory on dynamic properties, please do so. And I already shared the JavaScript Nuggets video in the README. And let's also export that right away. So we'll say here export const, and we're going to go with handle change is equal to job slice and then actions. Let's save this, and back in the add job, we want to grab the function. So import, and probably I could have used the auto import, but it is what it is. We want to go with handle and then change. Then we want to set up the use dispatch, something that I forgot when we were setting up the structure. So let me do it right now. So dispatch is equal to use dispatch. Let's invoke this. And then where we have the handle job input, instead of logging, we want to go with dispatch, then handle change. And now let's pass in the object with two things, name and value. And as a quick sign out, it's just my preference to set it up as an object because then the order is irrelevant. Basically, as long as you have the proper property, then you're good to go. Now let's try it out. So I'm going to go here, and I'll right away open up my DevTools just so we can see. So we have a job, and then we have all of these values, which is good. So let's try it out. I'm going to type something here, and notice not only I'm dispatching this action, but I also have the correct value in the state. And since I'm using that state value in my input as well, that's why we're persisting the value. And the same is going to be with our select ones as well. So now notice this is declined, and also the same thing is going to be in the state. Now the status is going to be equal to whatever we set up here in the select. All right, and up next, let's set up another reducer, which is going to be for clearing the values. So in the reducer, we're going to go with clear values. In this case, we're not going to be looking for state or any payload. We simply want to return the new state. Remember, in the Redux Toolkit tutorial, I did cover the fact that we have multiple options. Not only we can modify the state, but we can also return something from the reducer, and that something will be the new state. And this is an awesome use case where essentially we already have the initial state. And since we want to set it back to the default, since we want to set it back to our original values, we'll simply go with initial state. Now, the reason why we're spreading out the values, because eventually there's going to be a logic that gets the user location from the local storage. For now, you can also do it this way, where you simply go with return and then initial state. And this is exactly what I'm going to do in the beginning. And once we set up the job location equal to user location, I'll refactor my code a little bit. But if you want to skip on the typing, then just go with ... initial state. Remember, the logic is not going to change. We'll still set everything back to default. And then eventually there's going to be more code. So let me go right now to the add, or no, not add job. I want to go back to the slice. We want to go with clear and let's say values. Now it's going to be our function. Again, we don't need the state. We simply want to go with return, and let's return that initial state. So as we're going to be typing something in inputs or changing to select, of course, we'll be changing these state values, but the moment we click on clear button, we'll just set it equal to the default values, whatever you have in the initial state object. Now we do want to export that. So right after the handle change, let's go with clear values. Then in the add job, we also want to import that. And then let's look for the function. If you want, you can, of course, set up the separate function here in the add job. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to look for my clear button. And then let's set up the dispatch first. And then inside of it, let's pass in the clear values and let's invoke it. That's it. That's all we have to do. So now let me navigate back to the browser. Let me type some gibberish here. Let me change all of them. And the moment we click on clear, check it out. We go back to the default values. Beautiful. And once we have the clear values as well as handle change reducers in place, now let's work on creating a job. So this is the time where we'll connect to the server, because on the server, there's a route. So there's a root endpoint. And if we go with /jobs, and if we send a post request, very, very important, because there's going to be a GET request that gets all the jobs. But if we go with post request to the same endpoint, and if we send an object with these values, so position, company, and rest of the inputs that we already have. And yes, even though these are not going to be empty, in our case, since we have select, we do need to send them. And if we send the bearer token, because again, this is a protected route, only the logged in user can add that job to the job list. And if we provide all of these things, we'll get back the job object. Now, I can tell you right away that we're not going to use that job object just because we have two separate pages. So we have add job page where we're adding those jobs, and then in all the jobs, we're fetching those jobs from the same endpoint, like I said. and then we just display them over here. So therefore, yes, we'll get back the job object, but we're not going to use it on our front end. And just to showcase, let me open up here the network tab, just so you don't think that I'm messing with you. And let me add some dummy values again. So position here, then company, and then take a look at the request. So this is going to go to a jobs. That's the URL. So again, we have the root endpoint, then toolkit, and then jobs. Then we also pass in the bearer token. And if we're successful, like I said, we're going to get back the job object, which we're not going to use in our front-end application. As far as the setup, we're going to start by using the create async thunk, set it equal to create job. The action I'm going to name create job. We'll pass here this object, the job object. And as a side note, also, if you take a look at the payload, so this is what we're sending. That is the request payload. Notice company and rest of the values. This is what the server expects this job. And of course, this object will pass in from the add job page. Now, as far as the custom fetch goes, we're going to go with the function, the one that has already the root endpoint. We'll go with dot post, extremely important, /jobs. That's going to be the complete URL, a job. So the object that will pass in from add job. And also, yes, we do need to pass in the headers. And we'll set up the authorization header equal to bearer. And this is the case where it's really cool that in Thunk API, when we use get state, we get entire state. So even though we're working in the in the job slice, I can access the user slice. And in my opinion, it's really, really cool. Then if we're successful, I want to dispatch clear values, since we want to set it back to default. And of course, I want to go with response data. Again, we're not going to use it, but I want to, of course, return this. Then when it comes to error, again, this is really up to you. If you want to just display the error, you'll go with Thunk API, reject with the value, and then pass in the message property. If, however, you want to log out the user, we need to do the same thing like we already did when we were setting up the update user, I believe, where first I want to check for the status and if this is 401. So if there's anything wrong with our authentication, we actually log out the user, and this is the message that we pass in. And of course, if it's not 401, if there's some kind of other error, then we go here with reject with value and then pass in the same message. We'll definitely have some extra reducers. So create job pending. First, we'll just switch to loading. Then if everything's correct, we'll go with is loading is equal to false. And like I said, we're not using that job data. So we'll just say toast success and job created. Now, if there's some error, we're just going to go with state is loading, and then that is equal to false, and then toast error. And at the very end, we want to go to add job, grab the create job function, and then dispatch it. And since it's looking for the object, we'll set up the object and then pass in all the properties. Everything starting with position and ending with a status. So let's start working on this one. First, I want to go to job slice, and let's set up our create async thunk. So right after the initial state, I'm going to go with export const. Let's call this create job, and that is equal to create async thunk. As far as the action, like I said, I'm going to go with job and then create job. Then let's pass in our function. And in this case, yes, I'll set it up as a sync, but keep in mind that eventually there's going to be a job thunk as well, just like we did in user thunk. I'm not going to do it right now because I want to add all of the functions. So again, we're talking about the edit as well as delete one. And then once we have all of them in place, I will do that. So let's set up here this async for now. Then let's pass in the job that's coming from the add job, as well as thunk, and then API. And then in the function body, you will right away set up the try and catch. And we're going to look for response, which is coming from await, then custom fetch dot post. The endpoint is going to be jobs. Then we'll pass in the job that we're getting as a parameter, and also very, very important, protected route. So yes, we need to repeat the steps. First, we'll set up the headers property. Then there's going to be authorization property. And here we'll go with bearer. And then let's access now that thunk API. So let me set up the interpolation. We're going to go with thunk API dot, then get state. Let's invoke it. And then we have user, and then the token value as well. And if we're successful, like I said, we want to clear everything. So let's go with thunk API. Again, we can nicely access the dispatch. And then in dispatch, we'll pass in the clear value since we're in the same file. So we have access to that. And also, let's return the response.data. So return, then response and data. Now, when it comes to error, I'm not going to use the basic approach. I'll actually log out the user. So let's go with if error, then response. Again, that is the Axios thing. And then I'm looking for the status. And if it is equal to 401, I know that there's some type of authentication error. And if that is the case, let's first go with thunk API. Then we want to go with dispatch. And this is the case where we'll need to import that. So let me go with logout user. Hopefully it's going to give me an import. Looks like it does. Yep, logout user. Okay, that worked nicely. And now let's go with return. So say return here, then thunk API, then rejected value. And if we're logging out the user, we'll use that message. Now, you know what? I think I'm just going to take this value over here. Just too lazy to type this. We navigate back, copy and paste. And now we want to go, of course, with the basic return as well. So I'll copy this line of code. And then as far as the message, we're going to go here with error, then response, then dot, data, and then the message. Now, before we can invoke it and test it out, we do need to set up those extra reducers. So right after the reducers, I'm going to go with extra reducers. And then let's start here by saying create job and dot. And first one will be equal to a pending one. We'll be looking for the state. And then inside of the function body, let's just say state is loading, not is editing, sorry. Is loading is equal to true. So while the request is in the process, we set loading is equal to true, which again just controls our submit button. And then in order to set up rest of them, I'll just copy and paste. The second one is the fulfilled one. And here we want to set loading back to false. We do want to set up the toast. So let's say here toast dot and then success. Then also let's say job created. Let's save that. And then we want to change this one around and we'll set it equal to rejected. And then the value will still be false for loading. But when it comes to toast, we're actually going to go with error. And we'll pass in that payload. So that's the case where I want to go here. I want to destructure the action. I'm going to look for payload and we'll pass it in. Of course, it's going to be coming from rejected value and then whatever we pass in. Let's save this. Now we just need to go to add job. We want to grab the function. So create job and let's keep on moving. And then right after this one, we're going to go with our dispatch. Then we'll pass in create job. And now we want to set up all of the values. So we want to go with position, company, job location, job type, and also a status. So all of our state values. And now let's test it out. First of all, let me see whether the empty values thing is going to work. So yep, please fill out all the fields. So looks like that one is working. And now I'll open up the network just so we can see that we're making those requests. I'll say something, then something, and then also something for the job location. Again, what we're looking for is that response. I'm purposely not logging because I want to showcase how we can nicely see that in the network tab. So let's send it here. And there's unauthorized logging out. Okay, let's see. So there has to be some kind of error. In this case, I have authentication invalid. So let me try one more time. I'm going to go here with John 12. Then let me pass in the Gmail. Then also let me set up my password. Let's log in. That works, which is great. And now let's go back to the job. Notice how we didn't clear the values because we were not successful. So I have still all of them. And let me now send it. And again, we have unauthorized logging out. So now I clearly know that there is some kind of bug. So let me go back to the job slice and let me figure this one out. So job slice here. And of course, the issue is this one. It's not colon. There should be just a space. So let me double check what I have in the README, whether I actually set this one up here or not. So let me scroll up. Yep. So in here, I have everything correct. But when I was setting up the code in job slice, I messed it up. So I'm going to go back to login one more time. Hopefully this time it works. So John12, then gmail.com, then let's set up the password. Let's log in. Okay. We're again good. And now let's go here and let's just pass in these values. So we're going to go with something, something, and something. And yep. So notice we have jobs. The response is 201, which means that we successfully created a job. And now let me take a look at the headers first. So this is the full URL. The method is post. So we're creating a resource on the server. Let's keep on scrolling. We nicely pass in the bearer. And as you just saw, the smallest mistake and the token is not going to be valid. Basically, server is going to spit back the 401. Then let's keep on moving. All the way in the bottom, we have a user agent, which in this case, we don't really care about. And then payload. This is what we're sending. This is what the server expects. And we also have the preview. And then this is the response. So we're getting back that job. For time being, we cannot see the job since we don't have all jobs. Something that actually we'll work on up next. For now, if you see this. Okay, and before we start fetching all the jobs, optionally, we can also set up job location equal to the user location. And like I just said, this is optional. Technically, you don't have to set it up. If you want to type out the job location each and every time, you can definitely do so. In my case, it just kind of makes sense if we have already a user location. Most likely, you will be applying for jobs in that area. So we can nicely pre-fill this field. The way we'll do that in the add job, we'll grab the user. So instead of job slice, we'll look for store.user, grab the user, and we'll set up a use effect. So every time we'll open up a add job page, we will invoke this. Notice this is empty dependency array. So it will only run the first time. And eventually there's going to be a check for is editing. But for now, I'm not going to add that. But if you want, you can. I just want to showcase the error so you have a better understanding. So don't worry about that condition yet. For now, we want to go dispatch, and then remember we have handle change. And now I just want to say, hey, change the state where the property is job location. That's why I'll pass here the name equals to job location. So this will look for that job location state value. And as far as the location, well, we'll go with value and we'll set it equal to user location, since we have access to that. And then we'll deal with clear values. But again, this is the case where I do want to showcase the error, and then I'll add the code. So first, let's go to add job, and let's grab that user. So right after the job slice, I'm going to go with const. I'll pull out the user from, and we'll set it equal to use selector store, and then store dot job. We'll grab the user, and now let's set up that use effect. I'll rely on my auto import, so let me go here with use effect. Let's pass in the callback function. We'll invoke this every time we'll navigate to the page, and let's just go here with dispatch, then handle change, and let's pass in now the new object, where I'm going to go with name equals to job location. Again, this needs to match exactly the state property. And as far as the value, I'm going to go with user location. I know that user is an object, and in there is a location property. Let's save this, and let's see our result. So let me navigate to the browser here, and there seems to be some kind of bug. Let's see what is the issue here. So it's completing undefined reading location. Let's see. Okay, we pulled out the user right here. And yeah, of course, it's not store job. My bad. It's store and then user. My apologies. Let me go back now. As you can see, everything works. And now the value here for job location is equal to something. So if I go back here and change the location, let's say back to, and before we continue with the rest of the CRUD functionality, I also noticed that we don't display toast when we log out. However, in this case, I only want to display the toast if we pass in some message into the logout user. So remember, we are using it in the navbar, and at the moment we don't pass anything in. We just invoke logout user. But the way I want to set it up, if there's a payload, then we display toast. And essentially, it's going to mean that we'll only display that toast if we simply log out. So if, let's say, we implement that logout when we were using the update user, for example. So if we take a look at the update thunk, or user thunk, sorry, notice here, I invoke logout user, correct? And in this case, I don't want to display that message because we already passed it over here. Now, can you display this message, so the logout user, as well as this one? Absolutely. But in my case, I decided to make it more challenging. So we will only display the toast if we pass something into the logout user. Basically, the logic is going to look something like this, where I have logout user. I know that I can pass in the action. It's going to be an object, and in there's going to be a payload. And I'm just going to say if there is a payload. So if it's some kind of string value, only then we want to go with toast, and then success, and then let's pass in the payload. And in this case, I want to go to the navbar, and I want to pass in some value. So let's say I'm going to go with logging out, and then ... Let's save this. And now if we take a look at the application, we'll have the toast logging out. But if, let's say, there is a request and there is a 401, so unauthorized error, then we'll display a different error message, the one that we were setting up in the thunk. And also, let me showcase one more thing. Let me quickly log in. And I just want to showcase that if, let's say, you'll add some values in the add job and you'll log out, you'll actually notice that in our store, we still have those values. So take a look at the job. We still have this gibberish over here. Don't worry, we'll fix it at the very end of the project. So later, once we have all the features in place, we'll create another function that will not only have a logout user functionality, but we'll also have a functionality to set all the features back to the default state.